Pilate frees Jesus. What if the crucifixion never happened? If Pilate had released Jesus that morning, the world would never have heard the sound of nails piercing his flesh. No cross on the horizon, no deathly silence. Just a decision, made in seconds, capable of shattering centuries of destiny. But releasing Jesus would not have meant saving the world. It would have meant condemning it in another way. Pilate believed that releasing Jesus would end the problem, that washing his hands would be enough to silence the guilt. But freedom did not bring peace, it brought chaos. The people did not forget, the leaders did not back down, and the free Jesus became more dangerous than on the cross. Each step outside the praetorium began to distort the course of history, revealing something unsettling. Perhaps death was not the most terrible sacrifice. As the consequences accumulate, a question begins to haunt everything we know. What if crucifixion was not the necessary end, but the only way to avoid something far worse? Pilate's decision is not made in public, but in the heavy silence of his conscience. Before him, Jesus does not plead, does not argue, does not defend himself. This silence weighs more than any accusation. Pilate sees there not a criminal, but a man who does not fear the verdict. Moved more by fear than by justice, he chooses liberation as an attempt to escape responsibility. When Jesus leaves the praetorium, there is no celebration, only a collective unease. Something that should have ended begins there. Pilate believes he has avoided bloodshed, without realizing that he has just inaugurated a conflict that can no longer be contained. Jesus returns to the streets as someone who won without fighting, but his freedom does not calm the unrest. For the religious leaders, the public absolution transforms Jesus into a permanent, living, visible threat. For the people, doubt spreads. If he wasn't condemned, who is he really? Every word Jesus utters after his liberation carries a new weight, for now there is no cross to silence him. His teachings continue, more direct, more uncomfortable, revealing wounds that death would have quickly healed. The absence of sacrifice creates a strange void, where the message grows without the final shock that would conclude it. The conflict ceases to be symbolic and becomes prolonged, unsettling all who expected a definitive end. Without the execution, the empire watches with increasing scrutiny. Pilate realizes too late that freeing Jesus did not remove him from the political chessboard, but merely repositioned him. Rumors spread, followers increase, and every movement of Jesus is now monitored. There is no martyrdom to contain the message, nor a final scandal to end it. Jesus' continued presence creates constant tension, like a flame that will not be extinguished. Pilate begins to understand that the cross would have been a quick end, while freedom opened an unpredictable chapter. The fear that was once momentary transforms into permanent surveillance, and Roman power comes to fear not a venerated dead man, but a living man impossible to control. Pressure mounts around Jesus as his freedom prolongs the collective unease. Without the shock of crucifixion, people are forced to listen, reflect, and decide. Some turn away, frustrated by the absence of a heroic ending. Others draw even closer, now not out of compassion but out of conviction. Jesus continues to speak of a kingdom that does not depend on violence or visible power, and this further confuses them. Pilate feels the weight of the choice echoing in every report he receives. Freeing Jesus did not end the story. It merely removed the point where everyone expected it to end, leaving the conflict exposed and impossible to ignore. As the days pass, the absence of the cross begins to produce an unexpected effect. Without the symbol of immediate sacrifice, Jesus' message demands something more difficult than emotion: responsibility. There is no martyr to mourn, only a living man calling for real transformation. Many realize that following Jesus freely costs more than venerating him dead. Pilate hears reports of divisions arising within families, restless synagogues, and authorities losing moral control. He understands that execution would have ended everything quickly, but freedom keeps the wound open. The decision that seemed merciful reveals its hidden price. When the truth is not silenced, it forces each person to choose a side without excuses or shortcuts. As the movement grows, Jesus comes to be seen not as a victim but as a direct challenge to the established order. His constant presence prevents the narrative from being controlled. Without death, there is no resurrection to explain, only words that confront daily. Pilate begins to be questioned by Rome, accused of weakness and mismanagement. The governor realizes that freeing Jesus has trapped him in an endless crisis. Each teaching echoes as a silent accusation against power structures that preferred a distant martyr to a living man demanding change now. Fear ceases to be theological and becomes political. Jesus' freedom exposes something dangerous, a kingdom that grows without bloodshed, but corrodes authority through truth. If this interpretation is making you rethink this story, leave a comment below with your perspective. These videos are meant to provoke reflection, and I read all the comments. And if this type of content interests you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. Over time, the disciples themselves feel the weight of a story without a conclusion. Without a cross, without a tomb, without a final miracle, faith ceases to be sustained by an extraordinary event and begins to demand daily constancy. Some waver, others mature. Jesus remains present, but now his presence demands continuous choices, not just emotional devotion. Pilate observes that the absence of a tragic end makes everything more unstable. Nothing is resolved, nothing is concluded. The message does not crystallize into a symbol. It remains alive, unsettling, and demanding. The governor begins to understand that the cross would have simplified the story, while freedom transformed faith into a permanent responsibility for all involved. With Jesus free, hope is no longer postponed to the afterlife and begins to confront the present. His words no longer promise only future redemption, but expose immediate injustices, ingrained habits, and powers sustained by fear. This makes everything more dangerous. Without the cross to transform the message into sacred memory, it remains a living accusation. Pilate senses the city's shift in tone, as if something were out of place. There is no open persecution, but there is constant tension. Each of Jesus' teachings seems to shift the world a few centimeters from its known axis. Freedom, once seen as a solution, reveals itself as a greater problem. It does not allow anyone to hide behind the end of history, because history continues to happen. As time passes, Pilate realizes that his decision has made him a part of the narrative forever. Freeing Jesus did not absolve him of guilt. It only placed him as the unwitting guardian of something that grows unchecked. Rome demands stability. The leaders demand silence, but Jesus continues to speak. There is no clear crime to condemn, no violent act that justifies a new imprisonment. This ambiguity corrodes power more than an open rebellion. Pilate begins to understand that the problem was never Jesus' death but his living message. A crucified man becomes a symbol, a free man becomes a mirror, and no empire can govern for long when it is forced to see itself every day. Gradually, the realization becomes inevitable. The cross would have ended the conflict by transforming Jesus into a memory, but freedom kept him as a constant presence. Without martyrdom, there is no clear end, only continuity. People no longer discuss how Jesus died, but how to live in light of what he says. Pilate feels that freeing him was a mistake that cannot be corrected without exposing the very weakness of Roman power. Each day that Jesus remains free widens the fissure between authority and truth. The story continues open, uncomfortable, without catharsis, showing that perhaps the sacrifice was not just about dying, but about allowing humanity to end something it was not ready to sustain alive. Over time, Pilate comes to understand the true scope of the choice he made. Releasing Jesus not only altered a judgment, but removed the point of relief that death would have brought. Without the cross, there was no emotional closure, no immediate myth, no safe distance. Jesus' continued presence forces authorities, disciples, and the people to grapple daily with the truth without the filter of sacrifice. Pilate realizes that execution would have been an act of control, while freedom exposed the fragility of all systems. The governor understands too late that some men are more dangerous alive than dead, because alive, they do not allow their conscience to rest. As the years pass, the story of Jesus freed does not transform into a structured religion, but into continuous confrontation. Without the cross, there is no single symbol to unify, only scattered teachings that challenge people in different times and places. This makes the message less controllable, less institutional, more personal. Pilate, aged, carries the weight of having unleashed something that could never be contained. He understands that crucifixion would have ended an era quickly, while freedom opened a slow and irreversible process. The absence of sacrifice did not save the world from conflict. It only prolonged it, demanding constant transformation instead of instant redemption. In the end, Jesus' liberation reveals an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps the cross was not merely an instrument of death, but a necessary limit to human history. Without it, the message remains alive, demanding, and impossible to conclude. Pilate believed that releasing Jesus was an act of mercy, but he discovered that endless mercy can be heavier than condemnation. A free Jesus offers no rest, only confrontation. This version of the story does not end with clear redemption or visible victory, only with a question that remains open through time. Could humanity truly endure living in the face of truth without ever being able to place it on a cross and move on? In the final echo of this alternate history, it becomes clear that Pilate's choice not only changed Jesus' destiny, but also revealed something profound about humanity. A dead Messiah can be venerated, explained, and distanced. A living Messiah needs to be heard, followed, and confronted daily. Without the cross, there is no excuse for passivity nor refuge in inherited faith. Truth walks, speaks, and demands a response. Pilate freed Jesus believing he had solved a problem, but opened a permanent mirror before the world. And perhaps this is the most disturbing outcome of all. It was not death that transformed history, but humanity's inability to coexist with living truth without attempting to silence it in some way. If you enjoyed this approach and want to continue exploring stories that are almost never told this way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And now, click on the video that's appearing on the screen. It directly complements what you just watched and may completely change the way you see this story.